Women that don't take estrogen post-menopause have the same rates of heart disease as men because they don't have the estrogen around.
Girl, you've got questions. Questions about your body and how to feel good in it, about your hormones and how to keep them in check. Questions about your sex life and your whole health. Can you imagine having a best girlfriend who was also a triple board certified OBGYN? A girlfriend doctor you could call and ask or tell her anything. Someone who could show you how to live any stage of life, before, during, or after menopause, in a big, bold, and beautiful way. Well, friends, I'm your girlfriend doctor. I believe you are meant to flourish and shine, to embrace life and awaken to all its possibilities. Let's get there together. Welcome to our show. Perimenopause and menopause is a transition in life that is mandatory and natural, but suffering is optional. This is, of course, where I have spent my life's work, and I'm really passionate about empowering you, each and every one of you that are listening to this, to be empowered and in charge of your own health so that you have a natural, healthy transition and are embracing a longevity that will continue, a beautiful longevity for the rest of your life, that we not only have a long number of years that we're living, but the quality of life that we're living is powerful and beautiful and strong and healthy. And again, the list goes on. So I just finished a recording for Menopause and Perimenopause Masterclass that included Dr. Laura Brydon, Dr. Maritza Snyder, Dr. Karen Dunstan, and Dr. Shawn Tassone. However, funny as technology would be, we were allowed 4 people in total on the masterclass platform, and Shawn was the last to enter, so he was not able to be live during our conversation, but an amazing conversation, an amazing way to follow up and bring Dr. Shawn Tassone, who's an OBGYN and best-selling author of the Hormone Balance Bible, a book that is characterizing the 12 archetypes of female hormones, female different types that we may be experiencing, maybe one or more, but there may be a dominant archetype that we're experiencing right now. So it's great, and it's a great book to add to your library. And so in our discussion today, we're going to address some of the questions that came in and dig a little bit deeper into menopause and perimenopause. So thank you for being with me, and let me introduce you to Dr. Shawn Tassone. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Dr. Shawn Tassone with me as well for this in-depth questions and answers regarding perimenopause and menopause. Dr. Tassone, thank you for being here with me today.
Hey, thanks. I didn't realize we were wearing our festive holiday colors. I'm wearing black, so obviously I'm depressed, I guess. You look good.
Oh, well, thank you. Definitely working on festive season to bring some spring into the season here too.
I wish I could do the lipstick because it pops, it looks good.
Yes, for those of you that are listening and don't get to see what we are wearing today,
everybody.
Please join me on the YouTube channel. So at The Girlfriend Doctor on YouTube, and we'll see our beautiful and handsome faces here today. So, I was telling our audience just a little bit about our conundrum with our masterclass that we did. That was amazing masterclass. I had 4 of the most amazing speakers on my masterclass, and as guests. However, we had no idea that our technology only allowed 4 total people on the masterclass. So we missed out on Dr. Shawn's presence, but we had Dr. Laura Brydon, Dr. Maritza Snyder, Dr. Karen Dunstan as myself and myself for a great conversation. But it actually worked out to everyone's benefit because we had like hundreds of questions we couldn't answer. So we've taken that time to group some of these questions from, so many of our attendees, because we had, we had thousands of women registered. So we got a ton of questions in and was able to group them. And we're going to talk about some of the questions about birth control and cancer and cancer in general, talking about our endometrium, uterus, fibroids issues, endometriosis issues. And a really big question that came in over and over again was hormonal balance and hormone replacement therapy, as well as hot flashes and vaginal dryness. So a lot of questions about my product. Julva came in, so we're gonna talk about that too. So there are several things we're gonna talk about in this time that we have together. And I'm really glad that I get this follow-up interview to be able to share with the audience and address some of these
It's a
questions.
bonus.
It is. It's a huge bonus. It is. So it worked out really, really well. And I am a praying woman. I say, okay, I am looking at this as a true blessing. So I thank you for coming back on.
Oh, well, like I said earlier, I mean, the three women you had on I don't know Lara very well, but I know what she's written, and the other ladies on the panel and you are friends of mine. And and actually it's funny because being a guy in that arena of women's health, I think this gives me a different opportunity to maybe not be surrounded by all that estrogen. I'm just kidding. I'm surrounded. I guess I'm like, I obviously identify as male, but I have a lot of feminine qualities because I'm surrounded by women all the time. So I think sometimes it gives you a different perspective,
Well, and plus you've written your book, best-selling book, The Hormone Balance Bible. And I want to talk a little bit, if you'll introduce your book to our audience too, and your background, why you found the need and how you see you see your role in helping women transform, especially when it comes to hormones and perimenopause and menopause.
Well, I mean, you've written a bunch of books too, and you know that books tend to come from things that you're passionate about, or things that you find yourself talking a lot about. And in my case, what I found was over the last 20 years, as my hormone practice kind of developed and evolved, when I was talking to women, I found that if I said to them, oh, you're estrogen dominant or your testosterone's low, maybe we should look at your cortisol, they would understand it. But if I could reiterate some stories that I've heard from other women that have come before, that it just connected so much better. And so what I found was that over time, I kind of had these 12 kind of recurring themes, if you will, that I call archetypes. So if I was talking about testosterone deficiency, they would connect. But if I talked about the story of the nun, I was just getting a lot more light bulbs that were going off. So what I did was I came up with 12 hormonal archetypes that are just good starting points. Obviously, nothing is better than labs or, to really diagnose things. But for those women that were out there at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, figuring out, they were told by their doctors, as you see all the time too, I'm sure, oh, your hormones are fine, they're normal, you're just getting older or whatever, which you and I both know that's total garbage. But that's what happens a lot. And so for these women, it just gave them, I found it just gave them a starting point. These books are places for women to just kind of get the information that they're really looking for, and maybe hopefully guide them in a direction that they can connect with and find somebody that can help them.
Well, and it can be so isolating. We think we're alone. And so having this archetypal system to relate to, having things like we did in the perimenopause menopause masterclass, just you're not alone. You see the questions coming in, you see the comments, what we're talking about. It's affirming in so many ways, and also there's help, right?
Well, as you know, they're not being acknowledged.
Right.
I did a podcast once with Erin Bronkovich, and she said something that just kind of stuck with me. She said, if 10,000 men's penises fell off tomorrow, it would be like a national outrage. Like we would have to figure it out. We would have to fix it. But when hundreds of thousands of women are complaining about things from endometriosis to fibroids to pelvic pain to hormone imbalances, they're just told they're getting older, or there's nothing, you're just gonna have to suck it up. Sorry. And it's just not the case. It's totally not the case. The problem is that, and I'll, we both delivered babies. When you do OB and GYN, you're busy. You're super busy. And so you're trying to, you're not sleeping. And so for those of us like you and I that have gone the way of just doing gynecology, you can sit down, you can focus, you can spend more time with patients, and over time you just realize that, and it's an evolution, I think, as a practitioner too, hormones. But yeah, it's definitely something that you don't have to suffer with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that you're bringing flashbacks. I remember in my busy OBGYN practice I remember when 50 patients in one day,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
then, and going into solo practice was able to temper that, but still 20, 30 patients on average, and then going to GYN and being able to really spend some time. But more so than that too, is experiencing it myself. Cause I always say I was a good student. I didn't skip classes, not that much. Like I didn't miss, just wasn't taught some of the things that I've experienced and had to find answers for. So it is powerful. And I do think, and we talked about this in the masterclass, that the more we have doctors like you and women physicians, especially OBGYNs, going through this transition in life, the more natural options and acknowledgement we will hopefully receive in our culture in general. I would definitely agree with the Aaron Brockovich statement that if
Yeah.
this was happening to men, this would not be the issue. And there is a huge gender bias in medicine still today, but I think it's going to require more and more conversations like this. And every one of you that's listening to speak up, have your voice, share what's on your mind, demand to be acknowledged and heard. And there's always one next right step. The answer is never come back next year and I'll check again. It's always what's the one next right step I can be doing to be better and healthier next year than I am this year. In the case of, especially when it comes into in the case of perimenopause and menopause. And actually, I'll give the example of a physician, Shawn, that I heard speak one time, a urologist, and he said, and I feel this about women and pap smears. So the urologist was speaking, and he said, I was seeing this patient for 15 years, and year 15, him and his wife came in. I palpated his prostate. I felt a lump. And, I felt excited to tell him, look, I found this and I found it early, and we're going to get to the bottom of this, did a biopsy, and yes, it was cancer. So he's talking with the wife and the husband at their appointment for the biopsy results, have found the cancer, found it early, and we're going to get this taken care of. And he goes, the wife looked at me, the wife looked at me and said, what the hell have you been doing for 15 years? Right? And that's the
Yeah.
truth. We have to demand it as patients. The same with a pap smear, the same with the breast exam.
Mhm.
It is not like I have been trained myself to look at what are each and every one of you at risk for. And you do this, Shawn, like what are each and every one of you at risk for? And what do we need to do that's holistically going to improve your health so that next year you're even healthier than I'm seeing you this year? And so
Yeah,
I
and
appreciate your book. I mean, it is amazing, and it's a great resource for women. The Hormone Balance Bible, y'all.
thank you. I mean, and it's I just saw patients all day today, and it amazes me. Half of the patients that I see bring labs from other people where they're told they're normal, and
Ah,
you know, I always talk about it like this. It's like, you're either in the house or you're not in the house. That's normal or abnormal. But if you're in the house, like let's say your free T3, which is your thyroid, your active thyroid, is 2.3, which you're laying on the floor in the basement, but it's normal. We might be able to just move you up to the main floor, it'd still be normal. And I can't tell you how many lives I think have changed just moving you more into the middle of normal. It doesn't have to be this seismic shift for it to make a massive difference. And then they'll go see an endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist will be like, oh, you don't need this. And it's like, oh, but she felt so much better. And it's like, you can't just look at the numbers. You got to look at the person and what the story is. And that's I think what my book is more about. It's that narrative part of your history. Like, what is it that low testosterone, what's the story of low thyroid? And that's, I can't tell you. I had a lady in here earlier, 37. She's a pharmaceutical rep, so they drive all day. She eats poor diet. She's got 3 boys under the age of 7, and she's ragged. She's just not feeling like herself. And so I told her the story of the saboteur, which is low cortisol, because she did a Dutch test, and I'm looking at it, and so I start talking about the saboteur. These are women who have sabotaged their own health because they take care of everybody else, and they take care of their job. You're working 80 hours a week, you get home, you cook for your kids, and then your husband's whining because he's not getting sex and all this stuff. And you've sabotaged. You were a workaholic prior. That's the high cortisol. You're a workaholic prior to that, and now you're just burned out. And all of a sudden the tears start coming, because she said that's the first time somebody's actually told me this story. And I tell her, I'm like, and I say this in my book, this isn't me telling you. This is the thousands of women that I've had the pleasure of sitting with and just listening. I mean, if I have a superpower, and my ex-wife would probably disagree with this, but it's listening. It's just sitting and listening and giving people the space, women the space to tell their stories, and then acknowledge them. Like you said earlier, it's about acknowledgement. Yeah. Okay. That's not normal. And, like I had a lady earlier today too, her hemoglobin was 4. Now that's highly abnormal. That's a critical emergent value.
Yep.
But same thing, she's walking around telling everybody how exhausted she is, and not one person ever ordered a blood count on her. And she's had heavy periods. And it's like, I'm not a genius. I'm just listening to what you're telling me. And I just think that, I don't know why are doctors like that? But I guess it's just like you said, when you're seeing 50 people a day, it's like, well, I can put you on birth control pills, which probably would help, but she still wouldn't have known she had a hemoglobin she literally had like 20% of her body her blood supply,
Yeah.
25%.
Yeah.
And she was, when I talked to her, she was at the arcade with 4 teenage boys watching them. And I'm like, how are you even standing up? But women just power through, man. They just power through. Guys, a guy with a hemoglobin of 4, he'd be at home, he'd be in bed, and the world would be ending, but women just power through, and they do the same thing with hormones. They just keep going.
Yep, he'd be ordering delivery and watching football. But okay,
Yeah.
so and it's so true, and I've heard that over and over again. I'm just powering through painful sex. I'm just powering through, exhaustion. I'm powering through everything I need to do. We had a great discussion in the perimenopause menopause masterclass too, about birth control pills. So you guys, we'll put the link to the masterclass. It's at dranna.com/menopause masterclass. So you want to hear that discussion. So we won't go into, we talked a lot about birth control pills there, especially using them to manage menopausal symptoms. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I do want to address a couple questions that came in around birth control pills too. And one was, well, a woman, Jill wrote in, I understood that birth control pills would help prevent ovarian cancer. My mom had ovarian cancer. So how should I proceed?
What kind of cancer?
Ovarian cancer.
Yeah, that was, my mom passed away from that. Actually, that's kind of what started my whole journey, was when my mom, I think when she was diagnosed, she was 51. And she lived for, I think, 6 years. She would call me after the chemo, and joint pain and just hot flashes and irritability and all that stuff. And I couldn't do anything. I didn't know anything. And so when she passed, that's when I kind of went on my journey of trying to figure all this stuff out and learning as much as I could. Now, ovarian cancer, some doctors are opposed to hormones. Talking to some gynecologic oncologists, I don't think most are. When my mom had it, they wouldn't give her estrogen, and I think they thought that it stimulated the growth a little bit. So you have to kind of have that conversation with your oncologist as well. But what oncologists don't do, and this is across the board, whether it's breast or whatever, the oncologists are there to make you live longer. That's what they do, right? So they're going to give you all of the specs on this is what the chemo is. You can't take hormones. I want you to be on tamoxifen, whatever it is. But they're doing that just for sheer survival. They're not really ever interested in quality of life. And that's what the other thing is. We also see thousands of women a year, and breast cancer I see every once in a while, but it's not as common as you would think. Ovarian cancer even less so. But oncologists, that's all they see is cancer. So in their minds, everyone has cancer, right? And it's like, but I rarely see cancer. So it's like, I see the women suffering from having no hormones. So in a woman that has ovarian cancer, I probably would call her oncologist, GYN oncologist, and say, talk to them about it, first of all, and ask. But usually in those cases, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, whatever it is, unless you have a granulosa cell tumor or something that does secrete estrogen, and maybe that is a little more sensitive, I would probably give them estrogen. And I even have in my own practice, probably less than 10, but I have women that have a personal history of breast cancer. And because they've been patients of mine for a while, I know them. I know how they've been suffering. We've talked extensively and consented. It should be a consentable thing. If they can't, and I've always asked, can you live the life that you want to live? If you lived another 20 years like this, would that be good? Or if you lived another 18 years and you were using hormones, would that be good? And most of those women, they can't, they're not sexually active because it hurts, and they're not sleeping. And to me, sleep is more important than probably anything we do. And if they can't sleep, well, then we need to do something about it. So it's very individual, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think the recommendation, certainly women with ovarian cancer, breast cancer, always looking for the underlying cause that caused the cancer to begin with. To say it was estrogen is misogynistic. I'll go that far to say that, right? To say that it's estrogen, it's anti-woman to do that. And it is what caused it. Was it an estrogen disruptor, a hormone disruptor, typically an endocrine disruptor of some kind, a toxic exposure, something that affects our liver metabolism, something that affects our gut. When every single patient that I've addressed who had cancer, looking at the underlying reason was not their own natural production of hormones. Now, how we get rid of those hormones that we're producing naturally, and as well as the hormone disruptors that we're exposed to, or the hormones outside that we're exposed to, definitely alter the course of our health. And that's why what you do, what I do, is so important in empowering women to gain that control, and always looking for the underlying answer. In Jill's question, she was put on birth control pills because of that family history of ovarian cancer. And what the research has shown is that, 7 years of birth control pills will decrease your risk of ovarian cancer. But when you use those birth control pills, that's different. But what are other things that could also decrease the risk of ovarian cancer? I mean, how would you address that issue to reduce, when you have a family history of whether it's breast cancer, ovarian cancer, endometrial cancer, okay, heart disease, diabetes, whatever your family history is, how do you address that patient and to empower them to decrease their risks for developing that disease?
Well, I think, like in some cases, there's a lot of factors, obviously, with any cancer, like you said, nutrition, endocrine disruptors, where you live, pollution, alcohol consumption, genetics is obviously a big piece of that. So anybody that comes in that has colon, breast, ovary, even things like melanoma, prostate in their family, I will do a genetic test through a company like Myriad. Not just to look for BRCA, but to look for, there's check and all these other things now that we know as the genome starts to get sequenced a little bit more. And so then you have that person's risk and their risk history based on their genetics. And the great thing is, you can change the way you do screening, first of all. So, like say with breast cancer risks, I have a woman who is 35 and her sister died at like 32 from breast cancer. Turns out she did have a gene. And so we did MRIs of her breast because that's the recommendation. And there was no cancer. But at 36, she decided to do a radical mastectomy. It's her choice, just based on her risk factors. And actually, when they did the pathology from the breast tissue, she had an early cancer. So just by her being empowered enough to make that decision for herself, she saved her own life. You know, unluckily her sister, but her sister saved her sister's life by giving her that availability. So that's one thing. You can also like say for breast cancer, if I have a patient who has a significant family history, even if she has no genetic indicators, I will send them to like a website like Dr. Veronique Dessagne, who's a friend of ours,
Yes.
who has a lot of great information. She's done all the work, so I don't have to reiterate everything. And she's got all that great stuff, and increasing their, levels of, fish oil and sleep's huge, and keeping cortisol under control, and blood sugars, obviously. And there's a lot of things which, that's more your area actually even than mine. I do talk about keto and stuff. It's funny because keto is like such a hot button issue. I think one of the 1-star reviews I have on my book is because I talked about keto for like PCOS. I just mentioned it, and I mean, it's like it just like, it's so like heated. I didn't really even realize that.
Welcome to my world. But I would say, from my research and from working with thousands of women too, the keto, there's a clean way to do keto
Yeah.
and there's a dirty way. So keto green is clean. And what we've seen is improvements in all markers, inflammatory markers, blood
Mhm.
sugar markers, hot flashes and hormonal symptoms, 80 to 90% improvements in 2 weeks. So I think it's not just a good idea for women in perimenopause and menopause, but it's mandatory. And of course I can harp on that for a long time, but sugar is toxic. And again, controlling sugar, glucose, and hemoglobin A1C for any type of cancer, as well as optimizing vitamin D levels, vitamin D 25 hydroxy levels is really, really so important. Now, on this topic, and wrote in, she said, can you speak to women in menopause who have had breast cancer? Can you suggest balancing hormones naturally to restore natural sleep cycles, vaginal dryness, and other common symptoms in menopause when estrogen, including estriol and DHEA, are not allowed? So I know you probably have a few things to
Mm.
comment on this statement. So I'd love for
Yeah,
you to address it.
that's obviously, when you have a woman that has a history of breast cancer, I still, and especially if she's, estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor positive, obviously and I'll talk to her about that. I don't believe, it's not my personal belief that estrogen causes breast cancer. If it did, then every woman in the world would get breast cancer. It's like what you talked about, though. It's how are you metabolizing it? What metabolites are you bringing to the table? What are your genetics and all the other stuff that's going on? But estrogen can stimulate a cancer cell that has an estrogen receptor on it. So you have to be careful of that. And, first do no harm is what we live by. I don't want to stimulate cancer if I don't have to. So what I usually will try with women that have a history of breast cancer that are struggling is to put them on, I'll talk to them about something like, so it's piecemeal. So what's bothering you the most? Well, if it's vaginal dryness, I would direct them to Julva. If it's overall just kind of health, I might recommend that they try something like Feminescence or maca-based product, especially for hot flashes and sleep and things like that, because we know through the research that maca can help. Or your, maca product that is it maca green or what's
Mighty
that
Maca
called?
Plus. Yeah,
Mighty
thank you.
Maca, yeah.
Thanks for the
And
shout
put
out.
that in your shakes in the daytime. That's for women that like to do that. I'll refer them to your product because Feminescence is a capsule. And so there's those options. High doses of fish oil sometimes can help. Magnesium can help. And I'm also not somebody that likes to spend a bazillion dollars on supplements.
Right.
But I will recommend, and I'm a kind of a fan like you with the maca. It's like, I don't want you to to use a product that has a little bit of maca and like 17 other things. If we're going to use maca, let's use maca, right? Let's use a good dose of maca, like 500, 600 milligrams, and let's maximize that supplement before we switch and add something else. I'm just kind of like a minimalist when it comes to supplements, but there's definitely a lot of things you can do, even acupuncture or Chinese medicine, or, there's so many different options we have nowadays that we don't have to go right to estrogen. I will go to estrogen if it's somebody that I've known. She's tried other things, it's just not working. I will reach out and contact their oncologist, just to talk to them. And because I want it to be, I think, the worst thing you can do is have an animosity between providers. And then sometimes it's hard, but that doesn't help the patient. If she knows there's this negativity, I think that spills over. So it's just trying to find the main symptoms, target those main symptoms and try to use something that will target that particular symptom that might not be more stimulating to the estrogen receptor or the cancer cell.
Yeah. And what about, and so I would concur with that, because oftentimes that phone call provider to provider can make a huge difference, and they could give your book, right? They could give both our books to their provider and highlight sections that, make sense to them or they want to communicate to. And I'm always available to physicians. In fact, that's what only thing I do now is physician to physician consult. But also with using, like what we've seen too with DHEA and testosterone, is that using that in women with history of breast cancer, as the work of Dr. Rebecca Glazer has shown over the last 15 years that I've been following her work, is that there's no increased risk of breast cancer with this. So there are sometimes these considerations that you can have a discussion with your physician. Always, for anyone who has a history of breast cancer, is being treated with breast cancer, to really talk to your physician, healthcare provider team about this, and doing everything we can to optimize your health. Nothing irritates me more than when I see a patient who's been treated for breast cancer and or undergoing treatment for breast cancer, and I evaluate them and I do their vitamin D level among other tests, and their vitamin D's in the single digits or below 20. I remember a patient, a beautiful school teacher, retired school teacher, African-American woman from Sapelo Island, that came to my practice in Brunswick, Georgia. And she'd been treated for breast cancer, and I did her vitamin D25 hydroxy level and her level was 11. I just wanted to cry and I wanted to scream and yell at her oncologist and her primary care team. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And we want that number for anyone listening, like 11. No, it's not good. Below 20 is pathologic. Below 30 is pathologic. In my field, below 50 is pathologic. I mean, you should have an optimal number, 50 to 80, closer, even 80 to 100. And if there's been a personal history of cancer, I want that number as close to 80 as possible. So imagine her number was 11. And why I'm saying this is that we know that below 50, your risk of all types of cancer and cardiovascular disease exponentially increases. But the higher the number, the lower it is. So especially if we focus on avoid everything estrogen, and you're watching everything you put in your mouth, including soy and these other things, when your vitamin D level wasn't even optimized. So we really want to address these key hormone players. Well, Mighty Maca Plus is a superfood combination of powerful ingredients that really help give you energy, stamina, and not only that, it tastes good. So many people report reducing hot flashes, increased energy, better workouts. We have Olympic athletes, as well as, young adults, sport teams who are committed to drinking Mighty Maca. Let me tell you, this has been the one supplement that I recommend for my patients almost over 90% of the time. I give you 100% money back guarantee, and it is just fabulous. So check it out at dranna.com and use the code SHOW10 to get 10% off your first order. I have another great question here on hormone therapy. Says, what Elaine wrote in, what are your thoughts about the idea that estrogen is needed just to protect the brain and bones after menopause?
Well, it certainly can help with cognition. I mean, how many times have we heard the brain fog comment? I see that a lot with low thyroid too.
Oh, yeah.
And estrogen, we know will stop or slow bone loss. But actually, for bones, the combo that research has shown is the best is estrogen with testosterone. That double, not only are you're slowing the osteoclastic or the absorption of bone, but you're stimulating the osteoblastic laying down of new bone with each one of those. So in combination, they work really well. I personally think, the benefits to, we worry about breast cancer. We worry about, that's the main one. We worry about breast cancer. You hear about it all the time, but we don't talk about bone health, cardiovascular health, brain health, skin health, all these other things that you're going to benefit from. If you are a woman who's not taking hormones because you're afraid of breast cancer, that's respectable. I respect that. But if you feel miserable and you can't go out and do the things you want to do and work out and live a productive life and have a sexual relationship with your partner and do all those things that we know increase longevity, I think you're putting the cart in front of the horse. You're kind of, you're to be that scared of estrogen. I think the Women's Health Initiative did a real disservice, I feel like 15 years ago, and scared the crap out of everyone. And even now, how many family practice providers don't prescribe hormones because they're still afraid of them, even though there's a current study going on right now that has followed women on bioidenticals for 7 years, and there's no increased risk of breast cancer so far, and they're going to keep it going. But yeah, we the women that were in the Women's Health Initiative, they were all over 63. I mean, the whole study was kind of flawed, and it was what we already knew in the package insert. It wasn't any real new, but the media took it and went crazy. And they also didn't talk about the fact that colon cancer rates go down. Like we said, osteoporosis, your chances of having an osteoporotic fracture are way higher than breast cancer.
Yeah.
They just are. Cardiovascular, we know estrogen. Women that don't take estrogen post-menopause have the same rates of heart disease as men because they don't have the estrogen around. Estrogen is going to raise your good cholesterol, it's going to lower your bad cholesterol. And so it's, and like you talked about, it's silent. It's not like you can see it happening. We talk about the symptoms and how those get better, but it's the silent factors like with vitamin D. Vitamin D doesn't make you feel any different, but it protects you. And I always tell people that you're going to forget to take it because it's not like blood pressure medicine. So it's like you just don't know that it's helping, but it's helping, and it's long term. So I think, like you said, it's good to have people checking labs. I mean, when I was coming up as a youngster, we didn't even check labs. We didn't check thyroid. I started checking vitamin D in my pregnant patients 7 years ago, and I was in a big group and I was the only one that would do it. And they were giving me a hard time about it because ACOG came out and said you didn't need to do it. And I said, yeah, I know you don't need to, but 80% of my pregnant patients had levels below 30. I mean, all of them.
Wow.
And it's because we're afraid of the sun too. So that doesn't help. But yeah, it's like simple things sometimes can make the biggest differences.
Right. I always say the kind of cancer we get from lack of sun exposure is much worse than any cancer we get from sun exposure. So I am very rage heavy on the high, optimizing our vitamin D. So I'm glad you were doing that. And here's one that may fit into, is likely curious which archetype she would fit into. Louise wrote in and she says she's postmenopausal with auras preceding most of her hot flushes and wonders how to cope with these. She has experienced heightened anxiety, irritability, and rage at times. And they are like being possessed, and I really want to know how to cope with these. I've tried breathing exercises, drinking water, stillness, and I'm at a loss. You're not
Yeah. Well,
alone, Louise. You are not
yeah. And
alone.
sometimes you actually, and like I said, I mean, I don't know her history, but some of these women are super afraid of hormone replacement, and it could literally make you a completely different person, right? So a lot of that anxiety and rage and stuff, I think that's a lot of low progesterone type issues, especially with sleep and things like that. And it's one of those things. It's like, I mean, I've done this so much that if I could show women what they would feel like 6 weeks later, 90% of the time. And it's funny because especially in menopause is fairly easy because it's you're zero, right? Perimenopause is tougher because those women are going up and down and things are changing from month to month sometimes. But menopause, I think we can make a huge difference pretty quickly. And I always look at hormones as like this. Yes, hormones will fix things, they'll fix them quick, you'll feel better faster. But then also looking at the vitamins, looking at the supplements, because those things are going to help long term, and you can add those in kind of slowly. Because if you just tried maca will probably work 60 to 70% of the time. May not work forever for everybody, but it might take a while. It's like more of a weeks to months kind of thing, whereas hormones are going to be within a week probably in most instances. But yeah, for women that don't like them or don't want them, there are other options. But definitely would, for that individual, would consider estrogen and progesterone, and then even consider testosterone.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with or without a uterus, what's your thoughts on progesterone replacement?
Well, you and I grew up in that, time when if you didn't have a uterus, you didn't get progesterone. Because you didn't need it, because that was the only reason we would give it, was to protect against uterine cancer. The way I look at it now, though, is if you're just prescribing estrogen and you're not prescribing progesterone, you're kind of putting that woman into a quasi-estrogen dominant state. So they can still have things like irritability and weight gain and headaches and breast sensitivity and water retention. I do think that the progesterone, to me, progesterone is probably one of my favorite hormones because it can make sometimes the biggest differences. A lot of women that are on antidepressants for anxiety, like Prozac or other medications, sometimes just giving them progesterone, they can get off of the other stuff because it upregulates your GABA receptors, it calms you down, it helps you sleep at night. Sometimes these women, I mean, I just talked to a lady, she's up till 2 a.m. and then she kind of has this quasi sleep because she's constantly waking up, and you put her on progesterone and she's sleeping for 6 hours, and that makes a massive difference, obviously. So I'm a fan of doing both, even if you don't have a uterus.
Yep. And I think when I started recognizing using progesterone in women who had many years had a hysterectomy or many years postmenopausal and weren't on progesterone, and I put them on progesterone to help them get a good night's sleep, right? Or to help balance their hormones or protect their bone or protect their breast or whatever it may be. They would all come in and say, Dr. Anna, I feel like a cloud has lifted. I
Yeah.
feel like a cloud has lifted. And it's so critical. So I am in complete agreement with you and in this. And I know we're wrapping up, but I want you to share with our audience how they can see you in person, how
Sure.
they can get your books and connect with you on social media.
So my office phone, 512-956-0296. I take insurance. If I take it, I'll take it. The telemedicine rules now are a total gray zone, but I usually, if patients will promise that they'll see me at least once a year physically, I can prescribe. Otherwise, if they can't, I can make recommendations. My Instagram page is, I share tons of information there. Shawn Tassone, MD is my Instagram title. And if you're interested in just kind of getting started, if you are one of those ladies that's up at night and you're struggling and you don't know what to do, you've been told everything's normal, Tassone MD is my website, TASSONEMD.com /quiz. You can take my quiz. I know everybody has a quiz now, but My quiz is like 36 questions, and it's mathematically weighted on the back end to just give you one of the 12 archetypes. And I'm pretty sure it'll resonate. It gives you a starting point. Nothing is obviously as good as labs and seeing somebody, but it just gives you a good place to start. tassonemd.com/quiz. And it's also kind of fun.
Oh my gosh, you kidding? When you first came out with that, when did you come out with that? It's like several months ago, right?
Well, the book came out 6-7 months ago, but the quiz has been around for a couple of years. I just wasn't really, I probably had 30,000 women take the quiz now. And I have been, I mean, it's funny because I am continually shocked at the responses I get, like how, oh my God, that's totally me. I had one woman email me and say, oh, the quiz doesn't work. And I'm like, well, it's a quiz. It's not labs.
Yeah.
But she said, I'm actually hypothyroid. And it said I'm hyperthyroid. And I said, well, when was the last time you had your hormones checked? And she emailed me back like 2 weeks later and she said, oh, they just took me down on my medicine because I was on too much. So,
Aha, that's really cool. And I think I was the saboteur. I think that rings the
well, that would make sense because you work a lot.
So I was like, it was just that, yeah, you reminded me of that because I took it months ago.
Take some more Mighty Maca, man.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, I will. And we had this quote that came in during our masterclass, and I think it's so applicable to what we've discussed today. But Carol wrote in, she said, thank you. This has given me more information than any doctor I've ever seen. No one has even talked about menopause with me. So I want to just thank everyone for attending the masterclass, for listening to this and sharing this information. You guys, there's so many people you think are so educated, knowledgeable, et cetera. I mean, I suffered as a board certified OBGYN because I didn't understand what we're teaching above and beyond what we're taught in medical school. So check out the masterclass, check out tassonemd.com/quiz and his book, The Hormone Balance Bible. We've got so much good information for you to empower you and help you. And I'm glad that Dr. Tassone is seeing patients and treating patients in person and virtually, because we need more doctors that are doing this type of medicine, that are treating you beyond your symptoms. So thank you for everything you do, Shawn. I appreciate you coming on the Girlfriend Doctor Show and sharing your wisdom, your grace, your intelligence, and your humor with my audience today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone. We will be right back. You know, it is so heartwarming for me to have other colleagues, OBGYNs, that are speaking about these issues and these topics and sharing their wisdom with you, because there's so much that we need to address. There's so much more that we can share. And we did this amazing menopause and perimenopause masterclass. And so with Dr. Laura Brighton, Dr. Maritza Snyder, and Dr. Karen Dunstan, and now this follow-up with Dr. Shawn Tassone. So you've gotten a great insight into perimenopause and menopause. And I want to encourage you, if you did not listen to that masterclass, again, go to dranna.com/menopause masterclass and opt in and share, listen to that, the replay of this, and share both this podcast and that masterclass with your friends and guy friends too, because just understanding what we're going through, we're not alone. And it's not, it's not something we should just be powering through or just getting over, or, just put a smile on and act and play nice. Right? We always have to address the underlying issue. So again, check out Dr. Shawn Tassone and all of my colleagues too that were in the masterclass as well. There's information for you. If you have any questions, always can comment here below this video if you're watching on YouTube, or email us at team@drannacabeca.com, because my customer service team is amazing. They're amazing, hugely in helpful, and they want to get you answers. I really do have the best customer service team ever. They really are called the customer happiness team, and there's a reason for that. You will feel better just connecting with them. I do. And we talked about a couple things in this podcast with Shawn, as well as in the masterclass. And a few of the products that come up over and over again is certainly my Mighty Maca Plus product, which I created from my own healing journey around the world when I was diagnosed with infertility, early menopause. And it really, the ingredients combined together, because there are 30 superfoods combined with the primary ingredient of organic kosher maca, to help balance hormones. And we've seen improvements in progesterone numbers, markers of our adrenal function, such as DHEA, and improvements in overall well-being, hot flashes, et cetera. So something very safe. And for me, it's one of two things that I want all my patients to take: omega-3 fish oil and Mighty Maca Plus, to really help support them, especially in perimenopause and menopause. And yes, it's good for men too. I get this question all the time. It helps with libido, energy. We have a championship boxer, a cross-country cyclist, an Olympic pole vaulter, and so many more men from all different levels of life experiencing the benefits of Mighty Maca. So get a couple canisters while you're at it, because the men in your life will want it too. And progesterone, we talked about progesterone with or without a uterus, and transdermal progesterone, still available over the counter. And my formula is Balance. It's called Balance Cream, and it has progesterone and pregnenolone plus tripeptide to reduce the age spots. I'm a sun worshiper. I love the sun. I just don't want the aging effects of the sun. So I added tripeptide and some essential oils in with my progesterone pregnenolone Balance Cream. And then, of course, Julva for vaginal dryness, vulvar dryness for clitoral health, to apply topically, to use it on a daily basis to massage in and get the long-term results we're seeing, improving the youthfulness of what I call the most important real estate of our body, right? That really does set the tone for our quality of life. So I encourage you to ask me any questions. I love it. It's true. You can ask or tell me anything, and there is no such thing as TMI. I want to address the 4 pillars of health that I'm really passionate about. And that is that we are nourished, our body, mind, and spirit. We are shining from the inside out. So we want to shine and look healthy, radiantly healthy, and also embrace each other, embrace our relationship with ourselves, embrace connection and intimacy for the rest of our lives when it comes to sexual health as well. And then the 4th pillar is awaken the intelligence that's within us. So again, thank you for being here and listening to the Girlfriend Doctor Show and podcast. And I look forward to next time. And this is coming out during this holiday season. And I wish you a happy holidays and happy new year. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel here and get those notifications, and comment below. Let me know your thoughts, what you loved, and what your action step is.